Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident fanalist, as always, Ryan Schlip. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_data. Well, we're going to follow a similar pattern here, go through the notes, or the news. There's almost no news. Do a little bit of NFL draft, and then the main thing that I want to cover today is I want to talk about Max Crosby. We've kind of flirted with it and danced around it and have not really addressed it head on. I haven't really looked into it a ton, other than I know the guy's a stud, and there's rumors he's unhappy, and we obviously have connections with Bisaccia and with Josh Jacobs. And so, you know, obviously we need a pass rusher and all that, so it's an obvious connection there. But until today, we haven't really dug into it much more than that, and that's what I want to do today. In fact, I had to finally just push record because I started going down the rabbit hole of trying to come up with this complex thing to figure out the trade value cost, and it became a massive, it's like, this is not going to get done today. So that part of it will be a little bit more flimsy in terms of what it would cost to get him, but feeling pretty good about the rest of it. But real quick, running through the latest again, it's almost all just coaching stuff. Fortunately, nobody from our staff has been hired away as of right now. So as long as it stays that way, I guess I don't super care about anything else. Mike McCarthy has said that he will not coach in 2025. He's going to take some time to kind of step away. I believe he did that last time too, didn't he? He stepped away, took a year to kind of regather himself, and then went back to Dallas. So it looks like he's going to try that again. Eric Bieniemy is talking about coming back to the NFL. I'll be honest, I didn't even know he left the NFL. It's weird because I was told he's some kind of super genius that should have been a head coach, and then he ended up having to go back to college for a while and everything. So it's weird. I wonder what that's all about. Kellen Moore is being seen as a front runner for the Saints head coaching job. Ravens might be hiring Chuck Pagano as a senior secondary coach, which is a heck of a position for a guy like Chuck Pagano to have. I know he's a little bit of an older dog, but one of the more experienced coaches in the entire NFL, to have him come in as your senior secondary coach, that would be a pretty wild position for the Ravens to be able to be in. Cliff Kingsbury is going to stay in Washington. He's kind of in a Ben Johnson situation where, you know, things obviously went very well. He's getting a lot of looks, and he's like, nah, I'm going to stick it out here. It actually makes you feel a little bit better about the Ben Johnson situation, because if he hadn't already been a failed head coach, a lot of people would be thinking he is a big deal. He is the next Ben Johnson, except we saw how that went, and it was a disaster. Myles Garrett, I don't think I've mentioned this before. I've kind of talked about it, that it sounds like Myles Garrett isn't going anywhere, but just to further confirm that, Browns GM Andrew Berry told reporters he would not trade Myles Garrett and would like him to retire there. Now, to be fair, that doesn't really mean much. We've heard that plenty of time where it's like, oh, I would never do that, and then 5 seconds later they get traded. But again, it sounds already like that's kind of that pipe dream was already dead, and this kind of just, I don't want to say it puts the nail in the coffin, because again, it doesn't really move the needle a ton for me, but just further confirms what seems to be the case. Only other NFL news that I'd like to comment on is Bill Belichick said we should rename the Lombardi Trophy to the Tom Brady Trophy, and I think Bill Belichick should go ahead and shove it. He should go find one of those, actually physically find one of the Lombardi trophies that he earned and physically shove it. That would be my recommendation. All due respect to Mr. Bill Belichick. Dumbest thing he's ever said in his entire life. So I don't want to hear it. I don't want to talk about it. As for the NFL draft, let's do a couple things here. First of all, let's look at NFL Mock Draft Database. Fantastic resource, by the way. If we look at the most recent drafts here, first of all, with pick 23 in the 2025 NFL Draft, our consensus has determined the most likely selection for the Green Bay Packers will be Siobhan Revel, cornerback, East Carolina. That right now is the most popular pick. The next one is Benjamin Morrison, which is the cornerback out of Notre Dame. And so as far as the first round goes, and I haven't heard a ton as far as, you know, Packers fan community and whatnot and what everybody's super excited about, but a lot of the same names are starting to reemerge. The guys that I just listed, for example, PFF just yesterday did a Green Bay Packers 7-round mock draft. The first pick, they took Benjamin Morrison, cornerback out of Notre Dame. Now, I mentioned that I watched Benjamin Morrison. I only watched one game. It was Texas A&M, I believe. Was not massively over-impressed with him. Wouldn't have been my favorite thing in the world, but certainly going to be a very popular pick for the Green Bay Packers. They went on to select wide receiver Jalen Royals out of Utah State in round 2, cornerback Mello Dotson out of Kansas, round 3, Damian Martinez, running back out of Miami, center Seth McLaughlin out of Ohio State, edge Elijah Alston, Miami, and Ja'Cory Brooks, wide receiver out of Louisville. So a lot of repeat picks. We got a couple of wide receivers, a couple of corners, and then edge, center, running back. But again, Benjamin Morrison, very popular. And then you have The Athletic. They put out a mock draft just today for me, and they had Green Bay Packers selecting Mike Green, the edge rusher out of Marshall. I think we've already talked about all of these guys so far. Mike Green making some waves over at the, I don't know which one he's at. I think he's at the East-West. But I saw a tweet just come out today saying that Mike Green has been unblockable so far at Shrine. Now, that's probably not entirely true, but, there's always a lot of overhyped hype. But he was listed as the East-West Shrine Bowl Breakout Defensive Player of the Week following a standout performance. A couple other names that came up. Pro Football Network did a mock draft today. They have Benjamin Morrison going to the Packers, a cornerback out of Notre Dame. CBS did a first-round mock. They have Siobhan Revel. By the way, just so we're clear on it, Emeka Buka is a wide receiver that I know a lot of guys have talked about. So far, he's been taken before the Packers pick, just glancing at it, because I know a lot of people have talked about him. It's very close, but he's kind of going 19, 20, 21, and in this one, 22 to the Chargers. So we'll see if he ends up making it there. Also, surprisingly, I don't know if this is a thing that's happening more and more, but Tetroa, however you say his name, McMillan, wide receiver that at one point, I know they were talking top 5 prospect. He goes 21 in this mock. So I don't know if this is just stupid or if there's actually a possibility that guy could fall within striking distance for the Packers. That would be kind of interesting to keep an eye on. Pro Football Focus did a first-round mock draft. They have the Packers taking Jahdae Barron, cornerback out of Texas. It's another guy that I watched that I had mentioned. I don't know that I would be, I don't know. As of right now, I'm not doing backflips about Jahdae Barron. Again, I wonder if he's more of just a smaller, try-hard slot guy. Not that the Packers couldn't use that. If they're hell-bent on going Valentine and Keyshawn on the boundary, fine, but I don't like taking a slot in the first round. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. It would have to be kind of a Jair pick where he's seen as sort of a slot guy, but really he's talented enough to do the boundary thing. I don't know. I wasn't necessarily blown away. And again, Mike Green goes 1 pick earlier. Ibuka goes 21, 2 picks earlier. So out of striking distance, and then Tetroa McMillan goes 7 to the Jets, which is a little bit more of what I'm used to. Kyle Krabs did a mock draft for 33rd Teams, very good resource, very good website. They had a little bit more of an interesting one here. They had the Packers taking Trey Amos, cornerback out of Mississippi, out of Ole Miss. I have not watched him yet. I'm very, very excited to go do that very, very soon. But just grabbing a couple notes off of there, I didn't do my own little scouting report thing here. I'll just look at what they have to say because they got 33rd Team again. They have some really good resources here. But here's what he had to say about the pick. Green Bay is a team that needs help at some of the premium defensive positions. The edge room and cornerback room both loom as big questions. Kyle Krabs is very good at this, by the way. I really like him, especially given the uncertainty around the future of the cornerback of Jair Alexander. The Green Bay looks promising with their new safety talent. Getting perimeter coverage could help with this team and serve as a more legitimate contender in 2025 and beyond. Few cornerbacks are more physical and combative in this year's class than Trey Amos, who broke out in a big way in his only season with the Rebels. Here's their scouting overview. Ole Miss Rebels cornerback Trey Amos is a well-traveled prospect who spent time with 3 separate programs across the past 3 seasons. Stops at Louisiana, Alabama, and Ole Miss have afforded Amos a variety of coverage roles and responsibilities. He's taken on more man assignments in his 2 seasons in the SEC and has the makings of an impactful man-to-man cover corner. He's long, lean, and physical. Amos picks up the ball well in flight from the trail position and showcases desirable length and body control to extend and bat away the football. He is among the country's best secondary defenders in forced incompletions in 2024, and as a player with multiple scheme/coach exposures, he appears to have that coverage instinct necessary to contribute to his new team fairly quickly. Kind of reminds me of Xavier McKinney a little bit, where he had kind of experienced more of the two-high shell defense, and then the new defensive coordinator came in, and they're more of like a middle field close, single high, cover three type of a defense, whatever, and was much more adept at kind of doing whatever you needed him to do. He also pops up some of the ancillary areas of the position, including showing a likable taste for run support, which will only boost his value when he's assigned to playing half-turn deep thirds or hard flats in zone. So, again, I don't have a personal taste for Amos, but I do like hearing what they have to say about him. His abilities in man coverage, in playing, deep third, run support, physicality, hand-on-ball percentage, I don't necessarily know about interceptions, but pass breakups are at least getting you halfway there. And I also like it because it expands things out a little bit. You start getting into this thing where there's only 2 or 3 names, and Amos is a second-round pick. He's a second-round pick. Well, there's a pretty broad spectrum here, and this is why Gutekunst always gets dinged for this, because we get into this narrow focus of, no, there's only four guys right now that are worth a pick right now. It's like, no, that's not really true. So that'll be an interesting one to look into for sure. And lastly, you got the Draft Network did a first-round mock. They had us taking Benjamin Morrison. So that's becoming the pick du jour for the Packers for sure. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back and flesh out this whole Max Crosby thing. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. So, like I said, for those that don't know, Max Crosby is a really talented pass rusher for the Las Vegas Raiders. He is 27 years old. He's been, since about 2021, one of the best pass rushers in football. With the Green Bay Packers having the connections with the Raiders, as well as some comments, some kind of, I guess you could say loose comments, or nothing super definitive. So let's be specific. Here's just a couple of the comments that have happened from Max Crosby recently. So this is an article from Sporting News, December 25th, 2024. During the recent episode of The Rush with Max Crosby podcast, the Raiders star touched on many sources of frustration he has had in the time with the franchise. Quote, years of inconsistency, new coaches every other year, new teammates, and there's been plenty of times where I'm like, damn, like this D-line is cold, and then I come back and every single one of them is gone, Crosby said. Like, what the F? He says, it's tough, bro, because I feel for Myles Garrett because he's in the same boat. Referencing Garrett is noteworthy. Garrett recently expressed his desire to stay with Cleveland for the long haul, but has also made it clear he isn't interested in rebuilding. Quote, I'm not trying to rebuild, Garrett said. I'm trying to win right now, and I want to be apparent when the season is over and we have those discussions. Crosby said he's interested in having conversations with the Raiders about, quote, a lot of things that need to be talked about, unquote, and went on to say, I have no more guaranteed money. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of things that need to be talked about, and I'm looking forward to those conversations. I'm really looking forward to this offseason and the process. So, a lot of frustration there. Very similar to Myles Garrett, though, which is somewhat upsetting, might be overstating it, but how quickly things can change from, man, I'm really unhappy, all this stuff, to, okay, never mind, they're going to offer me a contract, I'm good, I'm staying right here. But let's start with that. Max Crosby's contract as of right now. So he signed in 2022 as his rookie extension, 4-year, $94 million contract with the Raiders, including $13 million signing bonus, $53 million guaranteed, average salary at $23.5 million. His cap hit in 2024 was $30.2 million. In 2025, it's $27.9. In 2026, it's about $25 million. Now, the actual base salary, because remember, a lot of this stuff When it comes down to the restructure, for example, that is the Raiders' problem. That's money that's already been paid. It doesn't go with him if he gets traded or whatever. That's $2.5 million per year. There's the signing bonus proration. That's $2.5 million per year. So really, when you look at just the base salary, you're talking $22.2 million, maybe a little bit more than that. We'll just call it $23 million in 2025. And then we'll call it, I don't know, a little less than $20 million in 2026. The base salary is $18.8. You got roster bonuses, workout bonuses. I don't know exactly what that all adds up to and whatnot on the contract. But again, base salary, $22 million in 2025, $19 million in 2026. Really not a terrible contract for a guy that is as good as he is. And beyond that, obviously, as he mentioned, I don't have any more guaranteed money on my contract, which means if I don't play, if I get injured, all that money just goes away. So if he were to be traded, there would need to be a negotiation of a new contract, which is good and bad. It's bad because, again, this is a nice little 2-year contract. If you only wanted Max Crosby for 2 years, you could just pay him that and then move on. It's good because you can give him a new contract, basically rip this one up, and write it out for what he's worth, which is going to be a little bit more money, but it's also going to be structured the way you want it to be structured, and it's going to be a significantly less, smaller cap hit than this, again, he's sitting at 28 overall, 22 as a base salary. I don't think he'd get paid 22 on the cap this year. So that's the most important thing, I suppose, is the fact that the contract factors in, but not really, because you'd be getting him, and he'd probably be looking for a new contract right out of the gate. And so that is just what it is. You would have to agree to that before the trade. You'd have to sit down with Max Crosby and discuss all those things. The other two components here, number one, is he even that good of a football player? And number two, what would it cost to get him here in terms of draft capital? Now, 2024, Max Crosby had a down year. There's no doubt about it. I know Clayton's made some comments about the fact that really Max Crosby wasn't all that much more productive than Rashawn Gary. And if you look at it, he had 54 pressures and 8 sacks on 462 attempts. So that would be 11.7%. It's not really superstar pass rush numbers. Let's back up 1 second. I want to go through his year to year. It's actually interesting how similar to Rashawn Gary it is. He's significantly higher, but the fact that year 3 was the year where everything kind of turned on for him. So his first year, he had a 65 grade. He had 45 pressures and 11 sacks on 481 attempts. I think he did have Defensive Rookie of the Year. I don't know if he won it or if he was in the running, or I don't remember exactly what it was, but because of the 11 sacks. But really the pressures weren't that good. He had a 58 run defense, 67 pass rush, whatever. Year 2, he goes down to a 57 overall, 56 run defense, 29 tackling grade, 58 pass rush grade, and had 48 pressures and 7 sacks on 536 attempts. That sucks. Year 3, something clicks hardcore. 92 PFF grade, 80 run defense grade, 71 tackling, 92 pass rush. He had 108 pressures and 11 sacks on 626 attempts. That's 17.2%. That's incredibly high. Next year was a 90 grade, 83 run defense, 84 pass rush. He had 81 pressures and 15 sacks on 650 attempts. Not as good, but still very good. The next year, 92 PFF grade, 93 run defense, 84 pass rush, has 94 pressures on 657 attempts and 15 sacks. So 94 divided by 657, 14%, still very high, and 15 sacks is ridiculous. Now, what happened this year? So he had 3 years in a row in the 90s, 92, 90, 92. That went down to a 74. His run defense was 80, 83, 93, 73. His pass rush was 92, 84, 84, 70. His pressures went from 108 to 81 to 94 to 54. Sacks were 11, 15, 15, 8. So, what do we do about that, right? Because obviously that's something that would panic people. So let's look at it. So first of all, let's set a baseline here for 2023 and just go through week to week, right? So it was 90, 70, 70, 90, 70, 80, 70, 90, 80, 80, 80, 60, 70, 90, 70, 90, almost a 70. So like every week, very consistently good. On the low end, his worst game was a 63. And then he had, high 80s or more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games. Very, very good. If you look at 2024, though, 70, 70, 60, 60, 80, 80, 60, 50, 50, 90, 50, 40. So what the heck is that all about? So glad you asked. So if you remember, he started off fine, 77 and then 76, and then it dropped off in week 3. Well, in week 2, he suffered a high ankle sprain on the second to last play of the Raiders' week 2 win against the Baltimore Ravens. So the second to last play, he suffers a high ankle sprain. He's right back out there week 3. He was listed as questionable on week 3, but did play against the Carolina Panthers. His performance was hampered by the ankle injury and was largely ineffective in the game. He still had 3 pressures, by the way, in that game. It was 40 attempts, which isn't 10%. I'm not used to seeing so many attempts by a pass rusher, but there we are. But he still had 3 pressures and no sacks in that game. Week 4, he's ruled out. The high ankle sprain thing is too much. And Max Crosby was pissed because, believe it or not, this is year 6. That was the first NFL game he's ever missed. So he's playing with a high ankle sprain in week 3 because he doesn't want to miss time. Week 4, they shut him down. Now, you wouldn't expect him to come back. You wouldn't have even expected him to play week 3, but you wouldn't expect him to come back after just 1 week down. However, Crosby joined Jim Gray on the latest episode of Let's Go podcast and discussed his goal of returning to the field next week. Quote, "The plan is to play versus Denver, but I'm just taking it one day at a time, and we're taking big strides every day." Gray asked Crosby if that plan is realistic. Keeping Crosby off the field takes a lot, so his ankle injury must be severe. But he asked him, is that even realistic? You're going to be back after being down for 1 week? You got a high ankle sprain. He says, 100%. I'm getting a lot better. Starting to feel like myself. It's been tough for me mentally because I'm used to playing every single rep, playing every single game, being out there every practice with my guys. I'm a captain. I'm a leader. I love being in front. I love being out there with my guys, and not being out there in practice and watching from afar, that's the biggest struggle. But at the end of the day, it's a blessing in disguise. Everything happens for a reason. I know it's going to pay off in the long run, so yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back out there. Sure enough, he comes back week 5. Did he play very well? No, he did not. 58 grade. Now, when I say did he play well, no. Statistically, no. He had a 42 run defense grade, but he still had a 70 pass rush grade, which included 3 pressures and 2 sacks in 30 attempts. That's a bad day for him. Weeks 6 through 14, he had ongoing ankle issues, injury recurrence. Crosby continued to play through ankle discomfort, but the injury worsened over time. He was listed as questionable or doubtful in multiple weeks, including weeks 12, 14, and 15. So immediately after week 6, he had an 85 PFF grade, 7 pressures on 36 attempts and a sack. And then week 7 against LA, he had an 80 PFF grade, 2 pressures and a sack on 24 attempts. Plus, very good run defense. Week 8, it starts to slip again. 64 grade, which is 3 pressures on 44 attempts. Week 9 had a 58 grade, 8 pressures on 43 attempts. Week 11, 58 grade, 3 pressures on 40 attempts. Week 12, where he's listed as being injured, might not play, whatever. He does play, has a 90 PFF grade, 5 pressures on 45 attempts. And then week 13, he plays. The play is severely hampered. He still has 8 pressures on 53 attempts, which is ridiculous. But his 55 grade, it's clearly showing up. And then week 14, when he was also, again, listed as questionable, doubtful, whatever, had a 47 grade, 4 pressures on 38 attempts, still performing at a high level as far as the statistics are concerned. However, week 15, he wasn't able to go. So week 14, he aggravated his ankle even worse against Tampa Bay, being chop blocked. The incident caused significant damage to the same ankle he had injured earlier in the season. It was severe enough to require surgery, and Crosby was ruled out week 15. Week 15, he officially is shut down with season-ending surgery. He was ruled out Week 15 against the Atlanta Falcons. He announced on social media he would undergo arthroscopic ankle surgery ending his 2024 season. He expressed disappointment but emphasized his commitment to returning stronger. He revealed that he had not been fully healthy since Week 3 and had been playing through pain all season. Now, there's just a couple things that stand out to me here. One, the injury clearly impacted him, and that's a big part of it, right? Number two, the thing that I love is if you want leadership, if that's what you want for your team, this guy has it in spades. Number three, though, can you expect him to come back from that kind of an injury and still play at a high level? Here are just a couple examples of guys that got shut down with high ankle injuries and how they did after. TJ Watt suffered a high ankle sprain during the 2022 season and missed several games. If you look at his grades, not that a down year for him means anything, but if you just look from 2019, year 3 was his big breakout too, 91, 92, 90, 2022, 82. So pretty big drop off there. And then right back to 92, 92. He had a little bit of a down year in 2022 when he suffered through a high ankle sprain. He got shut down, comes back 2023 and is exactly the same guy. In fact, he had 86 pressures and 20 sacks in 2023. Joey Bosa dealt with a high ankle sprain in 2020. Didn't really see a downturn from his play at all, although he did miss time, so one of the perks of not playing through it, I guess. But he goes out Week 15, comes back in 2021, and has a 86 PFF grade. His pass rush grade went from a 90.5 to a 90.3 the next year. His pressures went from a 61 up to a 69. His sacks went from an 8 up to a 10, to 10 sacks. So the bottom line is, considering his age, if he was a little older, I might be a little concerned. If you look at Von Miller, for example, Von Miller in 2022 underwent surgery to address the same issue. 2023 just fell off a cliff. Now, 2023, he was also injured again, so that's part of the issue, I suppose. But he was just bad. But 2024, basically a full bounce back. So it was kind of a weird down year. But he was, he's 35 going on 36 right now. This was last season, so he would have been 34 years old. Kind of a big difference between that and a 27-year-old. So I think given the surgery, given a full off season to recover, I don't think it's going to be a problem, and I expect him to return back to his full form. That would be my expectation. You never know. Even if he didn't have the injury, you would never know. You could trade for him and he could bust out here. You don't ever know what could happen. I'm just telling you that I'm not really concerned about the down year. I think there's a very good explanation for it and every reason to believe that he would bounce back from this. I mean, you could take Josh Jacobs as another example. He didn't even have an injury. The year before coming to Green Bay, he had a really down year. 2 years ago, I mean, the year prior to that, he was the best running back in football. So it's like, oh boy, what version are we going to get? He comes back and shows us that best in football version of himself. So, what does that leave us with? It really just leaves us with one question. We've already addressed everything else. What would it cost to trade for a guy like Max Crosby? Now, as weird as it sounds, when you go back and try to find some comps for trades of this caliber, it might sound a little crazy, but I think the closest one you're going to find is the Khalil Mack trade. When you look at the age, when you look at the number of sacks, when you look at the number of Pro Bowls and AP, all everything. I mean, Max Crosby checks all the boxes, and maybe not quite to the level of Khalil Mack, but it was really freaking close. So if we take that and dial it down just a little bit, to be clear, I went through. This was part of my process of trying to figure out a little trade calculator thing or whatever, but I went through 5 different trade charts. PFF has one, Harvard, Fitzgerald, Spielberg, Jimmy Johnson, and the Rich Hill trade chart. And I looked at the compensation that the Bears ultimately gave up to get Khalil Mack. And it came out to roughly the number 10 overall pick. It was a 2019 first, a 2020 first, a 2019 third, and a 2019 sixth. Bears got Khalil Mack, a 2019 second, and a 2020 seventh. And if you look at what the actual specific picks ended up being, and run the calculations, it's roughly the number 10 overall pick. So, look, I don't think the Packers would get out of this for less than a first-round pick. I think you're probably looking at a first and then some. Could you throw in a player sweetener? Could you possibly make it a second and next year's second, and then to make it worthwhile without ever using a first? Could you do a third this year and a first next year or something like that? Possibly, yeah. But I really do think that this would include a first-round pick. And I would be hard-pressed to believe that the Raiders, if they actually did something like this, which granted is a low chance of it anyways, but if they were to do something like this, that they'd be willing to do it for anything less than a first-round pick this year. Now, I know some people are on board with just no matter what. Yeah, it's worth it. Just, what are you going to do with a first-round pick anyway? Blah, 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 blah. One of the things that Clayton kind of laid out, 33rd Team posted something, the Raiders trade Max Crosby to the Packers for a second and a 2026 third. I think that's relatively low, but okay, sure. Can call that roughly a first-round pick, I guess. But it's always a lot easier to give away picks when you don't see the players. So he did a couple of polls, and he said, for example, would you trade Jaden Reed and Tucker Kraft for Max Crosby? 90% of respondents out of 2,064 said no. Would you trade Edgerrin Cooper and Marshawn Lloyd for Max Crosby? 88% said no. Now, let me see if he actually did the poll. I wouldn't be surprised if he did. Here we go. Would you accept this trade? Max Crosby for a 2025 second and a 2026 third? 84% said yes. So 84% said yes, a second and a third is worth it. But when you actually pick the last two second and third round picks that we've done, suddenly Packer fans don't want to do it anymore. We massively undervalue draft picks. Because we can't see them, we just say, oh, what are we going to get anyway? It's probably going to be a bust. Nobody cares. It's easy to just throw picks away. Really think about that, though. Would you trade Edgerrin Cooper and Marshawn Lloyd? Would you trade Jaden Reed and Tucker Kraft? If not, then you really need to think hard about whether or not you actually want to make this trade. And this isn't just arbitrary. Clayton didn't just pick the best two over the last 5 years and just, cherry pick. These are the last two drafts that we did, second round and third round. But I just thought that was hilarious. He did that poll. 84% said yes, give away a second and a third. When you actually put a face to it, 90% said no, I wouldn't do that trade. Final thought on this. Well, final two thoughts, I guess. Let me just reiterate. I don't believe he's going to go anywhere. I think that they're going to offer him the money required, and he's going to end up staying a Raider. So let's just, I've said it already, but let me reiterate. All right, final thought. There's been a lot of talk about the fact that this is a little bit outside of the Packers' wheelhouse. When you start talking about giving up first-round picks or equivalent value, whether it's a second and a third or 2 seconds or whatever the case may be, this is a little bit too rich for the Green Bay Packers. They don't like to do that kind of stuff. I would just like to remind you, and you could say that maybe this was fake or whatever, I don't know. The Packers were in on the Khalil Mack trade. Supposedly, they very seriously, and in fact, you could argue, offered something more than what the Bears did to get Khalil Mack. So there is no question that Brian Gutekunst is very willing to take massive swings if he feels it's the right person. And I genuinely believe that Max Crosby is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Top 5 for sure. Whether or not this high ankle sprain is going to damage him or cause him to not be as good of a football player, I don't know. But at 27 years old, I think he's got 3-4 years left in him. I think he brings the leadership. I think he brings all that. So, I'm not even going to give my I'm not even going to give my opinion on whether or not I think we should do it. I'm generally very opposed to it, but man, I don't know how you turn away from a guy like this if it becomes available. I'm not gonna be ridiculous and say Reggie White or anything, but the bottom line is these types of things very rarely become available, and I just have a hard time believing you can walk away from it if it actually were to become available. But first steps first, Max Crosby would have to be unhappy with what's being offered to him by the Raiders. That would have to be the first thing, and there would have to be sort of a pulling away. And at that point, we can kind of continue a little further. But since this has become a massive point of speculation, I wanted to kind of get my 2 cents. And I think the most, the most important thing is kind of addressing the issue of the downturn in 2024. I think that's kind of the biggest one. Outside of that, we'll just see how she goes. I believe he's going to get paid by the Raiders just like Myles Garrett, and they're going to continue on just like nothing. But stupid teams do stupid things sometimes, and who knows? Maybe they're going to look at it and be like, yeah, you got hurt, and we're basically rebuilding. Do we really want to pay this guy? Who knows? Who knows? But we'll see. It's going to be a feeding frenzy. There was a comment, and I hope it's not true. I read it when I was reading up on all this stuff on a Detroit Lions blog, and apparently, according to them, Max Crosby had made the case or the point, the statement, that if the Raiders didn't exist, the team he would most want to play for is the Lions. So we may have to offer up a bunch for Max Crosby just for self-preservation, because if he goes to Detroit, granted, this came up because they were talking about as a possible Aiden Hutchinson replacement. Hopefully they wouldn't go all the way in for a second pass rusher, but why wouldn't you? I don't know, but there's that as well. I don't want him as a Bear or a Viking or a Lion either, so we'll see how she goes. We'll keep an eye on it. Tell you what, I normally would take a break here. I don't have a ton else to do right now. Nothing that would fit in just a small segment, so why don't we just call it for the day, all right? If you have any questions, comments, concerns about any other trades or Max Crosby thoughts, feel free to call them in 608-501-0718. Otherwise, I will talk to you tonight, tomorrow, whatever. Have a good one. Bye-bye.